I'm Brianna, 38 years old, and 3 weeks ago, at my father's funeral, my brother announced he was selling our family home to pay off his gambling debts in front of 40 people. My mother nodded. She actually nodded and said, "Your dad would understand. Your sister can find another place." I stood there, surrounded by relatives who wouldn't meet my eyes, feeling like I'd been slapped in the middle of a crowded room. But here's the thing they didn't know. There was something the lawyer was about to reveal. Something my father had kept hidden for 15 years. Before I continue, if you find this story worth hearing, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to know what happened next. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it where you are? Now let me take you back 3 weeks, to the night I got the call at 2 in the morning. My phone lit up my tiny studio apartment in Center City, Philadelphia, the one with the IKEA bookshelf, the potted snake plant I'd kept alive for 6 years, and stacks of accounting textbooks I still couldn't bring myself to throw away. Mom's name flashed on the screen. "Your father collapsed. He's at Jefferson Memorial. Come now." I drove 45 minutes through empty highways in my 2015 Camry, the one with 120,000 miles and a check engine light I'd been ignoring for months. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I spotted Marcus's black Mercedes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He'd beaten me there. Of course he had. But it didn't matter. By the time I reached the ICU, Dad was already gone. The last time I'd spoken to him was 3 months earlier. A phone call that lasted maybe 90 seconds. He'd asked, "Are you doing okay?" And I'd said yes, and then we sat in silence until one of us made an excuse to hang up. I didn't know that would be the last time I'd hear his voice. I was used to being the one who arrived last. But this time, I wished I had arrived sooner. To understand what happened at that funeral, you need to understand my family. 20 years ago, I was 18, sitting at our dining room table with college acceptance letters spread out in front of me. Penn State, Temple, Drexel. I'd worked my entire high school career for those letters, and I needed my parents to help me figure out how to pay for it. My mother picked up the Temple letter, glanced at it, and set it down like it was junk mail. "Why would we spend that kind of money on you?" she said. "You're a girl. You'll get married, have children. Your husband will provide. That's how it works." I looked at my father. He was staring at his coffee cup, jaw tight, saying nothing. That same year, Marcus, 3 years older than me and already a sophomore at Villanova, got everything handed to him. Not scholarships, just checks from our parents. They'd bought him a Honda Accord for his commute. They'd rented him an apartment near campus so he wouldn't have to deal with dorm life. I got a list of jobs that hired 18-year-olds, so I figured it out myself. I applied for every scholarship I could find, landed enough to cover 70% of tuition at Temple, and worked 2 part-time jobs, weekday evenings at a call center, weekends at a coffee shop, to cover the rest. 4 years of sleeping 5 hours a night, of eating ramen because groceries were a luxury, of watching my classmates go to parties while I picked up extra shifts. I graduated with a 3.8 GPA and a CPA license that now hangs in my tiny apartment. I earned every letter of it. That's also why I stopped talking to my family for 2 years after graduation. I couldn't look at them without feeling the weight of everything they'd denied me. "Sons are the pillars of the family," my mother used to say. "Daughters are just guests passing through." I heard that phrase so many times, I started to believe it. The morning after Dad died, I drove back to the house I grew up in for the first time in 3 years. It was a colonial-style 4-bedroom in the suburbs of Philadelphia, built in 1985, with a wraparound porch and a backyard where I used to catch fireflies. The neighborhood was the kind where people put American flags on their mailboxes and knew each other's names. Upper middle class, respectable, the perfect backdrop for a family that looked perfect from the outside. Marcus was waiting at the front door when I pulled up. He hugged me, quick, one-armed, the way you hug someone you're obligated to acknowledge but don't particularly want to touch. "Long time, sis," he said. "You look tired." I didn't respond. I was too busy noticing the Louis Vuitton duffel bag in the hallway, the golf clubs leaning against the wall, the Gucci loafers lined up by the stairs. Marcus had been unemployed for 8 months. I knew because Mom had mentioned it during one of her rare guilt-trip phone calls. "Where's Mom?" I asked. "On the phone with the funeral home. She's got everything under control." I carried my overnight bag upstairs to my old room, or what used to be my room. The walls were still the same pale blue I'd painted them when I was 15, but everything else was different. My bed was gone, replaced by Marcus's overflow. More designer luggage, shoe boxes, a flat-screen TV still in its packaging. My childhood bedroom had become my brother's storage unit. I stood in the doorway looking at the pile of expensive things that belonged to a man who supposedly had no money, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. I didn't ask why my room had become his closet. Some questions answer themselves. The funeral was scheduled for 5 days later, per Dad's wishes. Simple, at Peterson and Sons, the local funeral home he'd driven past every day on his way to work. I handled the logistics. I called the funeral director, wrote the obituary, contacted relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I organized flowers, confirmed catering, and made sure the programs were printed with the right photo, the one of Dad from 10 years ago, before he started looking tired all the time. Marcus handled the sympathy. Whenever a neighbor stopped by with a casserole, he appeared in the doorway with his practiced grief, accepting condolences like a politician working a crowd. "Thank you so much for thinking of us," he'd say, hand on their shoulder, voice thick with emotion. Dad would have appreciated it, but behind closed doors things were different. I noticed it on the third day. Mom and Marcus kept having hushed conversations in the living room, conversations that stopped abruptly whenever I walked in. I'd catch fragments. After the funeral, and real estate, and handle it quickly. On the fourth night, I was passing the kitchen when I heard Marcus on his phone. I know," he was saying, his voice tight with something that sounded like fear. "I'll have it soon, after this week. Just give me until—" He saw me and hung up immediately. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody. Work stuff." He hadn't worked in 8 months. I didn't push it, but I filed it away in my mind, another piece of a puzzle I didn't yet understand. That night, I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, wondering what my brother was so desperate to pay for, and why his fear seemed bigger than his grief. The night before the funeral, I couldn't sleep. So I did what I always do when I can't settle my mind. I organized. Dad had a small office in the basement, a cluttered room with a wooden desk and filing cabinets from the 1990s. No one had touched it since he got sick. I figured I could at least start sorting through things, make myself useful in a way that wouldn't require me to talk to anyone. The first filing cabinet was full of tax returns and utility bills going back decades. The second held old photographs, report cards, mine and Marcus's, and a folder labeled Important Documents. Inside, I found my birth certificate, a few photos of me as a baby, and a single sheet of paper with a logo I didn't recognize. Farwell Family Holdings, LLC, dated 2009. I stared at it. The document was some kind of operating agreement, dense with legal language I didn't fully understand, but I saw my name in the text, and my signature at the bottom, loopy and uncertain, the handwriting of my 23-year-old self. I remembered that day, 2009. Dad had called me and asked me to come home to sign some papers. Just administrative stuff for the business, he'd said. Nothing important. I was fresh out of college, still trusting him despite everything, so I signed where he pointed without reading the fine print. I'd forgotten about it completely until now. I slipped the paper into my purse, planning to ask Mom about it later. When I found her in the kitchen the next morning and mentioned Farwell Family Holdings, she waved her hand dismissively. "That company dissolved years ago. Don't waste your time digging through the past." So I didn't mention it again, but I kept the paper. Something told me to. The funeral was on a Thursday, gray and cold, the kind of November day that makes everything feel heavier. Peterson and Sons was the largest funeral home in the area, with dark wood paneling and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the pews. Over 40 people came, relatives, Dad's former colleagues from the construction company he'd managed, neighbors who remembered him as the quiet man who always shoveled their driveways after snowstorms. Marcus delivered the eulogy. He stood at the podium in a Tom Ford suit. I recognized the cut because I'd seen it in a magazine, $3,000 minimum, and spoke about Dad like they'd been best friends. He talked about fishing trips they'd taken, advice Dad had given him, the unbreakable bond between father and son. I sat in the back row, listening to stories I'd never heard, wondering if any of them were even true. The fishing trips, maybe, but the heart-to-heart conversations, the deep, meaningful connection? I'd lived in that house for 18 years, and I'd never seen Dad talk to Marcus about anything more personal than sports scores. But the crowd was moved. Women dabbed their eyes, men nodded solemnly. Marcus had always been good at performing. Mom sat in the front row, wearing black Chanel and her signature pearl necklace. A gift from Marcus, she liked to remind people, though we all knew Dad had paid for it. She accepted condolences with practiced dignity, the grieving widow who had everything under control. No one came to check on me. No one asked how I was holding up. I was just background noise, the daughter who'd been away too long to matter. I didn't know the eulogy was just the opening act. The real performance was coming next. After the final prayer, most people started gathering their coats to leave, but Marcus stepped back up to the podium and cleared his throat. If I could have everyone's attention for just another moment. The room stilled. I saw Mom nod at him from her seat, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, like a director cueing an actor. Our family has been discussing what to do going forward, Marcus said, his voice carrying that same rehearsed emotion from the eulogy. And we've made a difficult decision. We're going to sell the family home. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aunt Patricia, Dad's sister, put a hand to her chest. The house on Maple? Richard loved that house. I know, Marcus said, shaking his head with what looked like genuine sorrow. But it's time for a fresh start. Mom doesn't want to be there alone, surrounded by memories. And frankly, the upkeep is too much for her to handle by herself. He paused, letting that sink in, then added, We've already discussed it as a family. Mom, me, and Brianna. We're all in agreement. My stomach dropped. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't even been asked. I started to stand, to say something, but Mom turned around and looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, warning. Don't you dare make a scene. The house will be listed next month, Marcus continued. We just wanted everyone to know, so there are no surprises. After the announcement, people approached Mom with sympathy. Such a hard decision. Richard would understand. You have to do what's best for the family. No one asked me what I thought. I stood frozen in the back of the room, watching my childhood home get sold off at my father's funeral, and I didn't say a word. But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked toward Mom, and she rose from her seat like they'd rehearsed this too. I want to add something, she said, smoothing her black dress as she walked to the front. I know some of you might be wondering about Brianna's situation. My face went hot. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Brianna is a strong, independent young woman, Mom continued, her tone the same one she used when explaining why we couldn't afford something she didn't want to buy. She has a good job, her own apartment. She moved away years ago and built her own life. Richard would be proud of that. She paused, tilting her head with a sad smile. She doesn't need the house, not the way Marcus does. He's had some setbacks. He needs family support right now. I'm sure you all understand. Someone in the crowd, I think it was Aunt Dorothy, whispered, Well, she did abandon them for years. Your dad would understand, Mom said, looking directly at me now. Your sister can find another place. I felt the words land like a physical blow. She'd just told our entire extended family that I didn't deserve anything, that I was an afterthought, that whatever happened to my childhood home was none of my concern. A distant cousin named Barbara leaned toward me. "You know your mother's right, honey. You've done so well for yourself. Marcus needs the help more than you do." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them about the scholarships I'd had to fight for, the jobs I'd worked, the years I'd spent building something from nothing, while Marcus drained every resource our parents had. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling smaller than I had in years, and said nothing. After the service, I drifted outside while everyone else stayed to mingle. The November air was bitter, but I needed it. I needed to breathe something that didn't feel like betrayal. Through the window, I watched Marcus shake hands with a man in a tailored gray suit. They exchanged business cards. The man handed Marcus a folder with the logo of a real estate agency on the front. He'd brought a realtor to the funeral. Mom appeared beside the man, gesturing toward the door like she was giving directions. A minute later, I saw them all get into separate cars and drive away, toward the house, I realized. They were showing the property before Dad was even in the ground. I walked back inside to find my purse, and that's when I heard Aunt Dorothy talking to a group of cousins. "Well, what do you expect? Brianna abandoned them, didn't call, didn't visit for years, and now she wants to show up and claim something? Blood doesn't work that way." I froze in the hallway, hidden by a pillar, and listened. "Her poor mother," someone else added, "having to deal with a daughter like that on top of losing her husband." At least Marcus stayed. He's been there for Linda through everything. I thought about all the times I'd called and been told Mom was busy, all the holidays I'd offered to come home, only to be told, "We're keeping it small this year," all the ways I'd tried to rebuild bridges they kept burning. On my way out, I noticed something new on the front lawn of the funeral home, a real estate sign with a "Coming Soon" banner. They'd planned this for a while, and no one had thought to tell me. I took a photo of the sign. Evidence, I told myself, though I didn't know yet what for. That night, I tried to talk to them. The house was quiet. Most of the relatives had gone back to their hotels or their own homes, leaving just the three of us in the living room, Mom in Dad's leather armchair, Marcus sprawled on the couch, me standing in the doorway like a visitor in my own childhood home. "I need to ask you something," I said, "about selling the house." Mom looked up from her phone. "What about it?" "You said we all agreed. We didn't. No one asked me anything." Marcus laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Come on, Bree. You haven't been part of this family in years. What do you care what happens to it?" "I care because it's our family home, because Dad died 4 days ago and you're already showing it to buyers, because I have just as much right to be part of this decision as either of you." Mom's expression hardened. "You have no right. You walked away. You didn't call, didn't visit, didn't help when your father was sick. And now you want to show up and demand a say?" I called. "You said you didn't need me." "We didn't need your guilt. We needed your presence." Marcus sat up, fixing me with a look that was almost pitying. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I need the money from this house. I've got investment debts. A lot of them. And if you make a scene about this, I'll tell everyone exactly what kind of daughter you've been. How you cut Dad off for 2 years. How you broke his heart." My throat tightened. That was my deepest shame. The years I'd refused to speak to Dad, and Marcus had just weaponized it. "I'm trying to help the family," he said. "You're trying to tear it apart." I left the room without another word, but I didn't leave the house. Not yet. I know what you're probably thinking right now. Why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I call a lawyer right then and there? But here's the thing you have to understand. This was my family, my mother, my brother, the people I'd spent my entire childhood trying to earn love from. Walking away from them had already broken something inside me once. I wasn't ready to do it again. If you've ever been in a situation like this, where standing up for yourself meant losing everyone you'd ever known, drop a comment below. Tell me I'm not alone. And if you want to know what happened next, stay with me. 3 days after the funeral, Mom called another family gathering, this time at the house. "To discuss the estate," she said, "so everyone's on the same page." 15 people crowded into the dining room. Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Frank, my grandmother on Mom's side, various cousins I barely recognized. The room felt smaller than I remembered, stuffed with bodies and opinions and the weight of decisions being made without me. Mom stood at the head of the table, a stack of papers in front of her. Marcus sat to her right, arms crossed, looking at me like I was a problem to be managed. "Here's the situation," Mom began. "Richard didn't leave a complicated estate. The house is the primary asset, worth around $800,000. My plan is to sell it, pay off outstanding debts, and use the remainder to support myself in my retirement." "What about Brianna?" Grandma asked. She was the only one who looked at me with something other than judgment. "Brianna has her own career," Mom said smoothly. "She doesn't need support. She moved out years ago, built her own life. I'm proud of her for that." "But she's still your daughter," Grandma pressed. "Richard's daughter." Aunt Dorothy, Mom's sister, jumped in. "With all due respect, Mother, Brianna hasn't exactly been present. She cut ties with this family. You can't walk away and then come back with your hand out." "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I'm asking to be included in decisions about my own family's property." "You are included," Marcus said with a thin smile. "You're sitting right here, aren't you?" The room rippled with uncomfortable laughter. I felt my face flush. No one defended me. Not one person at that table spoke up to say I deserved a voice. Grandma caught my eye and looked away, her lips pressed tight. The real purpose of the meeting became clear an hour later. Marcus slid a document across the table toward me. The header read, "Disclaimer of interest in estate property." "What is this?" I asked. "It's simple," Mom said. "You sign this and you formally release any claim to the house or the proceeds from its sale. It protects everyone, keeps things clean." I stared at the paper. "You want me to give up my inheritance?" "You're not giving up anything," Marcus said. "Dad didn't leave you anything in his will. This just makes it official, so we can move forward without complications." "How do you know what Dad left me?" Marcus exchanged a glance with Mom. "We had the will reviewed by a lawyer. The house goes to Mom. That's it. This is just paperwork. If I already have no claim, why do you need me to sign?" His jaw tightened. "Because we want this done quickly. The buyer's ready. We don't need some estranged daughter showing up 6 months from now claiming she deserves a cut." "And if I don't sign?" Mom leaned forward. "Then I'll tell everyone in this room, and everyone who wasn't here, exactly what kind of daughter you've been. How you abandoned your father for 2 years when he needed you most. How you broke his heart." The same threat Marcus had made. They'd clearly coordinated. "Sign the paper, Brianna," Uncle Frank said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Everyone was staring at me, waiting. I picked up the pen, Dad's Mont Blanc, I realized, the one he'd gotten for his 20-year work anniversary, and held it over the line. Then I set it down. "I need time to think," I said. Marcus's smile disappeared. "You have 24 hours. I drove back to my apartment that night feeling like I'd already lost. The studio felt emptier than usual. I sat on my second-hand couch in the dark, streetlights casting long shadows through the window, and ran through my options. I could sign the paper, give up whatever claim I might have, walk away, let them have the house. It would be easier. No more family meetings, no more accusations, no more being made to feel like I didn't belong. But something in me refused. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the memory of all those nights I'd worked double shifts to pay for a degree my parents refused to fund. Maybe it was the way Mom had announced to 40 people that I didn't matter. Or maybe it was the paper in my purse, the one with the logo I didn't recognize, Farwell Family Holdings LLC. I pulled it out and looked at it again in the dim light. My signature was there at the bottom, loopy and young, from 15 years ago. Dad had asked me to sign it, and I had without question, because I trusted him. What had I signed? I thought about calling a lawyer, but it was almost midnight, and I didn't even know where to start. Then I remembered. Dad's funeral program had listed a name, Gerald Whitmore, estate attorney, Henderson Family Council for 20 years. I found the number in Dad's old address book, which I'd taken from his office along with a few other things. Tomorrow, I decided. Tomorrow I would call this Gerald Whitmore and ask him what Farwell Family Holdings meant. If I was going to lose, at least I wanted to know the truth first. Gerald Whitmore's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building in downtown Philadelphia, the kind of place with brass nameplates and Persian rugs and the faint smell of old paper. He was older than I expected, late 60s with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look like someone's grandfather. But his eyes were sharp when he shook my hand. "Miss Henderson, I was hoping you'd call." That surprised me. "You were? Please sit down." He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. "I've been your father's estate attorney for 20 years. He and I had an understanding." I pulled the LLC document from my bag and slid it across the desk. "I found this in his files. I don't know what it means, but it has my name on it." Whitmore picked it up and something flickered across his face. Recognition. Maybe relief. "Do you know about Farwell Family Holdings LLC?" he asked. "My mother said the company dissolved years ago." "Your mother is mistaken." He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder, thick, well-organized, like he'd been keeping it ready. "Miss Henderson, there's something your father asked me to tell you, but only when the time was right." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "The family house, the one on Maple Street, it's not part of your father's estate." "What?" "In 2009, your father transferred the property into Farwell Family Holdings LLC. The house belongs to the LLC, not to him personally." I stared at him. "Then who owns the LLC?" Whitmore looked at me over his glasses. "You do, Miss Henderson. You're the sole member. You have been for 15 years. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. "That's not possible," I finally managed. "I would have known. Someone would have told me." Whitmore shook his head slowly. "Your father was very specific about confidentiality. He didn't want anyone to know. Not your mother, not your brother, not even you, until it became necessary." "But why?" He pulled another document from the folder. This one was older, the paper slightly yellowed. "In 2008, your father came to me with concerns. He'd noticed changes in Marcus's behavior, gambling, debts, the beginnings of what would become a serious problem." I thought of Marcus's desperate phone call at the funeral home, the fear in his voice. "Your father loved your brother," Whitmore continued, "but he didn't trust him. He knew that if anything happened to him, Marcus would find a way to drain every asset the family had. So he created a structure to protect the most valuable one, the house." "Yes. He transferred it into the LLC in 2009 and designated you, and only you, as the sole member. The operating agreement is ironclad, properly notarized, filed with the state of Pennsylvania, maintained and compliant every year since." "He paid the LLC fees this whole time?" "He set up a small fund specifically for that purpose. He thought of everything." I felt tears prick at my eyes. All those years I thought Dad didn't care. All those silences I interpreted as indifference. And this whole time, he'd been building a fortress around me. "Your father wasn't good with words," Whitmore said gently. "But he was meticulous with documents. This was his way of saying what he couldn't." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "What do I do now?" "Now," he said, "we set the record straight." Whitmore let me sit in his office for as long as I needed. He made tea, Earl Grey, in china cups that looked like they'd been his grandmother's, and waited while I processed everything. For the first time since Dad died, I really cried. Not the polite, controlled tears I'd shed at the funeral. These were ugly, gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. Grief and relief and confusion all tangled together. Dad had seen me. All along, he'd seen me. I thought about every time he'd sat silent while Mom dismissed me. Every holiday where Marcus was celebrated and I was tolerated. I'd interpreted his silence as agreement, as proof that he thought I mattered less too. But that wasn't it at all. He just hadn't known how to fight for me out loud. So he'd fought for me on paper. Whitmore handed me a sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in Dad's handwriting. Shaky, the letters uneven, like his hands had been unsteady when he wrote it. He gave me this 3 months ago, Whitmore said. Asked me to hold it until you needed it. I didn't open it there. I wasn't ready. But I ran my thumb over the letters of my name and felt something shift inside me. There's going to be a formal will reading, Whitmore said. I'll arrange it for Friday. I'll invite everyone who was at that family meeting. They'll fight this, I said. They'll say I manipulated Dad or that the documents are fake. Let them say whatever they want. He pulled out another folder, this one full of receipts, notarized signatures, filing confirmations. I've been preparing for this moment for 15 years. The paper trail is impeccable. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope. How do you want to handle this? Whitmore asked. I'd stopped crying by then. The tea had gone cold, but my mind was sharper than it had been in days. I could tell them privately, I said. Pull Mom and Marcus aside, explain the situation, avoid a public scene. You could, Whitmore agreed. That would certainly be the more diplomatic approach. But they didn't give me that courtesy. I thought about the funeral announcement, the family meeting, the way they'd tried to humiliate me into submission in front of everyone I'd grown up with. They chose to do this publicly, to make me look like the ungrateful daughter in front of 40 people. So you'd like to set the record straight in the same venue? I'd like the truth to come out the same way the lies did. Whitmore nodded slowly. I'll schedule the formal will reading for Friday at 10 a.m. I'll invite everyone who was at that meeting. Your mother, brother, aunts, uncles, grandmother. They'll expect it to be a routine procedure. Will you need anything from me? Just be there. Bring the original document you found. I'll handle the rest. He paused, then added, There's someone else who might be helpful. Patricia Callahan. She was your father's accountant for years. She witnessed the original LLC formation. If your family challenges the legitimacy of the documents, she can corroborate everything. She's willing to do that? She's been waiting to do that. She always liked you, Miss Henderson, and she knew your father's true intentions. I left Whitmore's office with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Certainty. I wasn't going to fight this battle by screaming or crying or begging them to see me. I was going to let the paperwork speak for itself. Patricia Callahan lived in a modest townhouse in Conshohocken, the kind of place with window boxes full of mums and a welcome mat that actually meant it. She was in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of face that made you want to tell her your problems. I wondered when you'd come, she said, ushering me into her living room. Gerald called ahead. Tea? Please? She poured from a ceramic pot while I sat on her floral couch, trying to figure out how to start. But Patricia did it for me. Your father talked about you constantly, she said. Did you know that? No. He did. Every time you accomplished something, passed your CPA exam, got a promotion, he'd find a way to mention it. My daughter's doing well, he'd say. She's made something of herself. My throat tightened. Then why didn't he ever tell me? Because Richard Henderson was the most emotionally constipated man I've ever met. She said it with affection, not cruelty. He grew up in a house where feelings were weaknesses. He didn't know how to say, I love you, so he showed it in the only language he understood, spreadsheets and legal documents. The LLC. I was there when he set it up. I witnessed the signatures, helped him file the paperwork. He made me promise not to tell anyone, not even you, unless something went wrong. And now something's gone wrong. Your mother and brother are about to sell a house that doesn't belong to them. I'd say that qualifies. She set down her teacup and looked at me directly. Your father wasn't perfect, Brianna, but in the end, he chose you. Don't let them take that away. I nodded. I wouldn't. The night before the will reading, Marcus called. 24 hours is up, he said. Have you made your decision? I was sitting on my bed, Dad's letter still unopened on my nightstand. I'll be at the reading tomorrow. Good. I could hear the smile in his voice. Bring a pen. We'll get this wrapped up and everyone can move on. I'll see you there, Marcus. After he hung up, Mom called. Her tone was different, softer, almost pleading. Brianna, I know things have been difficult between us, but I need you to understand. This isn't about pushing you out. It's about survival. Marcus has gotten himself into trouble, and if we don't help him, people will get hurt. What kind of trouble? She hesitated. He owes money to dangerous people, a lot of money, over 300,000, maybe closer to 350. I've already given him everything I had saved. The house was supposed to be the last resort. So that was the real number. $340,000 in gambling debts. My brother had hollowed himself out chasing wins that never came. I'm sorry Marcus is struggling, I said, but selling Dad's house, my house, isn't going to fix him. It's just going to enable him to keep going. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I'll see you tomorrow, Mom. I hung up and finally opened Dad's letter. His handwriting was shaky, the words uneven, but the message was clear. Brianna, I know your mother and brother haven't treated you fairly. I'm sorry I never had the courage to say so out loud. I wasn't a good father, but I tried to leave you something they couldn't take away. You're the only one I trust with what matters. Dad. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my blazer pocket. Tomorrow, I wouldn't need to say much. The paper would do the talking. Friday morning, 10 a.m., Gerald Whitmore's office. The conference room was larger than his private office, with a mahogany table long enough to seat 12 and oil paintings of Philadelphia landmarks on the walls. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting prismatic light across the polished wood. I arrived at 9:45 and found Whitmore already setting up, folders arranged at his seat, a glass of water at each place, the overhead projector ready in case he needed to display documents. Are you ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. The family started arriving at 9:55. Mom came first, wearing black again, this time a designer dress I didn't recognize, with the pearl necklace gleaming at her throat. She barely glanced at me before taking a seat at the opposite end of the table. Marcus strolled in 15 minutes late, because of course he did. He was wearing the Tom Ford suit again, freshly pressed, as if this were a business meeting where he expected to close a deal. He clapped Whitmore on the shoulder like they were old friends. Thanks for putting this together, Jerry. Let's make it quick, yeah? Uncle Frank, Aunt Dorothy, Grandma, and a handful of cousins filed in after him, the same cast of characters from the family meeting, here to witness what they assumed would be my final defeat. Marcus caught my eye across the table and winked. Actually winked like we were sharing a joke. Brought a pen this time? He asked. I didn't answer. I just smoothed my navy blazer, the same one I wore to important client meetings, the one I'd bought with my own money after my first promotion, and waited. Whitmore closed the door and took his place at the head of the table. Shall we begin? I have to pause here for a second, because this is the moment I'd been waiting for my entire life. Not for revenge. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't sitting in that conference room dreaming about making my family suffer. I was waiting to be seen, to be acknowledged, to finally, after 32 years, have someone stand up and say that I mattered. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like no matter what you accomplished, it was never enough, then you know exactly how I felt in that chair. Like and comment if you're still with me. And stay close. What happened next changed everything. Whitmore began with the standard formalities, confirming everyone's identity, explaining the purpose of the reading, outlining the basic structure of Dad's estate. Richard Henderson's will is straightforward, he said, turning pages in his folder. Personal effects are to be distributed among family members at Mrs. Henderson's discretion. His vehicle, a 2018 Honda Accord, goes to Marcus. His savings accounts, totaling approximately $47,000, go to his wife, Linda. Mom nodded, looking satisfied. Marcus leaned back in his chair with the air of someone watching a horse he'd bet on pull ahead. And the house? Aunt Dorothy prompted. The Maple Street property? Whitmore paused. He removed his glasses, cleaned them on his tie, and put them back on, a gesture I would later realize was entirely deliberate. "Regarding the house," he said slowly, "there's an issue." The room went quiet. Marcus sat up straighter. "What kind of issue?" Mom asked. "The property on Maple Street is not part of Mr. Henderson's personal estate." "That's ridiculous," Marcus said. "He owned that house for 30 years. "He lived in that house for 30 years, Whitmore corrected. "But the ownership transferred in 2009. The property is held by a limited liability company called Farwell Family Holdings, LLC. I watched the blood drain from my mother's face. Marcus looked confused, like someone had started speaking a language he didn't understand. "What the hell is Farwell Family Holdings?" he demanded. Whitmore pulled a thick folder from beneath his notes. On the cover, in Dad's neat handwriting, was a label: Property Documents. Do not destroy. "I think," Whitmore said, "we need to discuss the corporate structure your father put in place 15 years ago." Whitmore laid out the documents one by one, like a dealer spreading cards across a table. In 2009, Richard Henderson transferred the Maple Street property into a limited liability company. The LLC was properly formed, the transfer was legally recorded with the county, and all taxes and fees have been paid every year since. "So the company owns the house," Marcus said. "Fine. Who owns the company?" "The operating agreement specifies a single member, one person with complete control over the LLC and all its assets." Whitmore looked at me. Every head in the room turned to follow his gaze. "That person is Brianna Henderson." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Marcus exploded out of his chair. "That's bullshit!" His face had gone from pale to red in an instant. "She manipulated him. She got to him when he was sick and confused." "The documents were executed in 2009, Whitmore said calmly. "Your father was 53 years old and in perfect health. The signatures were notarized by a licensed notary public and witnessed by his accountant, who is prepared to testify to his mental competence at the time." "I don't believe this." Marcus grabbed one of the documents and scanned it, his hands shaking. "This is fraud. This is your father's choice," Whitmore said. "Made deliberately, maintained carefully, and legally binding." Mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He never told me. 25 years of marriage and he never said a word. He asked me to keep it confidential. I honored that request." I sat very still, feeling the weight of 40 years of family dynamics shifting in real time. My aunts were staring at me. My grandmother had tears in her eyes, and my brother looked like he wanted to flip the table. "The house is worth nearly $900,000, Marcus said. "It belongs to the family." "It belongs to the LLC, Whitmore replied, "and the LLC belongs to your sister." Mom turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before, some mixture of betrayal and desperation that made her look older than her 67 years. "You knew," she said. "This whole time you knew." "I found out 3 days ago," I said, "after you announced at Dad's funeral that I could find another place." "Don't you dare!" Marcus started. "Let her finish," Grandma said sharply. Everyone fell silent. I took a breath. "I found a document in Dad's office and didn't know what it meant. I called Mr. Whitmore to ask. He told me the truth, a truth that neither of you ever bothered to share, because you'd already decided I didn't deserve to be part of this family's decisions." Mom's composure cracked. "We need that money, Brianna. Marcus is in trouble, real trouble. He owes people who don't negotiate." "How much?" Uncle Frank asked, frowning. Marcus said nothing, so I did. $340,000. Gambling debts. The room erupted. Aunt Dorothy's hand flew to her chest. One of my cousins muttered, "Jesus Christ." Uncle Frank stared at Marcus like he'd never seen him before. That's not accurate," Marcus stammered. "It's investments, not—" "I've been covering for him for years," Mom said, her voice breaking. "I've given him everything I had. The house was supposed to be the last resort." She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Your father's only been gone 2 weeks, and you're going to take our home? I'm not taking anything, I said. I'm claiming what Dad left me. The same way you've been claiming everything he left you. The only difference is, he made sure this one couldn't be taken away. The pearl necklace around her throat caught the light as she bowed her head. For the first time in my life, I had said something she couldn't argue with. I stood up. Everyone's attention snapped to me, some hostile, some curious, some carefully neutral. I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not here to gloat, I said. And I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here because Dad wanted me to have this. He made that choice when I was 23 years old, and he kept it secret for 15 years. That tells me something about what he believed. It tells me he was manipulated, Marcus spat. It tells me he saw what was coming. I looked directly at my brother. He knew you'd burn through everything he built if given the chance. And he was right. Marcus lunged forward, and for a moment I thought he might actually hit me. But Uncle Frank grabbed his arm. Sit down, Uncle Frank said. You've done enough damage. I turned to my mother. You can stay in the house. I'm not going to put you on the street, but it will be under a formal lease. $1 a month, renewable yearly, at my discretion. $1 a month? She repeated. And Marcus doesn't live there. That's non-negotiable. You can't. I can. The house belongs to my LLC. I decide who lives in it. The room was dead silent. I could see the calculations happening behind everyone's eyes, the power shifting, the old assumptions crumbling. Marcus needs help, I said softer now. Real help, not money to throw at bookmakers. If he wants to get treatment for his addiction, I'll support that, but I won't be part of enabling him to destroy himself. I picked up my bag and looked around the table one last time. I didn't ask for this, but I'm not going to apologize for accepting what my father chose to give me. Then I walked out. I made it halfway down the hallway before I heard footsteps behind me. Brianna, wait. I turned. It was Grandma, my mother's mother, moving faster than I'd seen her move in years, her cane clicking against the marble floor. Grandma, I'm sorry. I know that was... Don't apologize. She reached me and took my hand in both of hers. Her grip was stronger than I expected. I need to tell you something. We stepped into an alcove near the elevator, out of sight from the conference room. I knew, she said. What? About the LLC. Richard told me before he died. He asked for my blessing. I stared at her. You knew this whole time? He came to me 3 months ago, right after his diagnosis, said he didn't have much time left and needed to know he'd done the right thing. Her eyes glistened. He asked me, do you think I should protect Brianna? And I told him yes, because your mother wasn't going to. I felt tears threatening again. Why didn't you say anything at the family meeting? Because it wasn't my secret to tell, and because... She sighed. I wanted to see if your mother would come to her senses on her own, give her a chance to do the right thing. She didn't. No, she didn't. Grandma squeezed my hand. But you did. You stood your ground. You didn't let them bully you. I learned from watching you, I said quietly. She smiled, a real smile, the kind I remembered from my childhood. You remind me of your grandfather. He was stubborn too, in the best way. She patted my cheek and turned back toward the conference room. Go home, sweetheart. You've earned a rest. I'll handle what's left in there. I was almost to my car when Marcus caught up with me. Brianna, wait, please. I stopped but didn't turn around. I could hear his breathing, ragged, uneven, like he'd been running. I know you're angry, he said. You have every right to be, but you don't understand what's happening. Then explain it. He moved around to face me, and for the first time, I saw past the expensive suit and the practiced confidence. My brother looked broken. Dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling, the desperation of a man who had run out of options. The people I owe money to, he said. They're not patient. They've been sending people to follow me, leaving notes on my car. Last week someone slashed my tires. Marcus! I'm scared, Bree. His voice cracked. I got in over my head, and I kept thinking I could win it back, just one more bet, one more game, and then it would all be fine. But it never was. And now I'm so deep I can't see a way out. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The man who had been handed everything I'd had to fight for, who had squandered every advantage and still expected someone else to clean up his mess. And underneath all that, I saw the kid who used to play catch with me in the backyard. The teenager who walked me to school when I was scared of the older kids, before everything went wrong. You need rehab, I said, not money. I know. 90 days, minimum. A real program, not some weekend retreat. He nodded, not meeting my eyes. If you do that, I said, really commit to getting help, then we can talk about what comes next, but not before. And if I don't? Then you're on your own. Mom was waiting by my car. She must have slipped out a side entrance while I was talking to Marcus. Her makeup was streaked, the careful facade completely dissolved. She looked smaller somehow, like grief and shock had compressed her. Did he leave anything for me? She asked quietly. Richard, in that folder of his. Any message, any explanation? I thought about lying, telling her that Dad had written her a beautiful letter full of reconciliation and forgiveness, but she didn't deserve a lie. She deserved the truth. No, I said. He didn't mention you at all. She flinched like I'd struck her. 35 years, she whispered. I gave him 35 years of my life, and he left everything to— He left the house to me, I said. Not because he loved me more, because he knew you and Marcus would burn through it, and he was right. I was doing what I thought was best for the family. You were doing what was best for Marcus. There's a difference. She started to argue, then stopped. Something shifted in her expression, not acceptance exactly, but the beginning of recognition. I raised him the way I was raised, she said. Sons are investments, daughters are temporary. That's what my mother taught me. Grandma seems to have changed her mind, a bitter laugh. She always liked you better. Maybe she just saw me more clearly. Mom reached up and unclasped her pearl necklace, the one she'd worn every day for as long as I could remember, and held it in her palm for a moment. I don't know how to fix this, she said. Neither do I admitted. But maybe that's where we start. She didn't respond. She just walked away, still holding the pearls, leaving me alone in the parking lot with the weight of everything that had just changed. The will reading broke up slowly after I left. I heard the details later, from Grandma and from Whitmore. Aunt Dorothy had tried to argue that the LLC was somehow fraudulent, but Whitmore shut her down with documentation that went back 15 years. Notarized signatures, state filings, annual reports. Every I dotted, every T crossed. Uncle Frank had taken Marcus aside and told him he was a disappointment. Harsh, maybe, but Marcus just nodded. He was too hollowed out to fight anymore. Patricia Callahan called me that evening. You did beautifully, she said. Your father would have been so proud. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. She told me she'd watched the family leave one by one. Some of them stopped to shake Whitmore's hand and mutter apologies for their earlier assumptions. A few cousins had apparently texted me, though I hadn't checked my phone yet. Your grandmother stayed until the end, Patricia added. She wanted to make sure the message was clear. She told your mother, "You did this to yourself, Linda. Don't blame the child." I smiled despite everything. Grandma had always had a spine of steel, even when the rest of us were crumbling. 2 days later, Whitmore's office sent me a formal package, the original operating agreement, the property deed, the keys to the house on Maple Street. All of it now officially, publicly mine. I held the keys in my hand, the same brass keyring Dad had carried for 30 years, with a worn leather fob and a tiny photo of me at age 5 tucked inside the clear window. He'd been carrying my picture all along. I just never knew where to look. 2 weeks later, I moved back into the house on Maple Street. Not permanently, not at first. I kept my apartment in the city for work. But I started spending weekends at the house, clearing out the clutter, fixing the things Dad had let go during his final months. The first thing I did was empty my old bedroom. Marcus's designer luggage, the shoeboxes full of sneakers he couldn't afford, the flat-screen TV still in its packaging, all of it went into the garage. He could pick it up whenever he wanted, but it wasn't staying in my room anymore. Then I repainted the walls. Soft sage green this time, a color I'd always wanted but never asked for. Mom lived in the guest room now, under the lease agreement we'd drawn up. $1 a month. She was quiet mostly. We didn't talk much, but we didn't fight either. It was a kind of peace I'd never expected. Awkward, fragile, but real. Marcus checked himself into a 90-day program in New Jersey. A real one, with group therapy and addiction counseling and no access to his phone. I didn't visit, but I sent a letter. Just one line. I'm rooting for you. He wrote back 2 weeks later. 2 words. Thank you. On Sundays, I started having dinner with Grandma. She'd come over with a casserole or a pie, and we'd sit in the kitchen where I used to do homework, and she'd tell me stories about my grandfather, the stubborn man I'd apparently inherited more than I knew. The house felt different now, lighter, like it had been holding its breath for years, waiting for someone to let it exhale. I put fresh flowers on the mantel where Dad's photo sat, yellow roses, his favorite. Last night, I sat on the porch as the sun went down, holding a cup of ginger tea, the same kind Dad used to drink every evening, though I never knew that until I found his mug in the cabinet. I'd read his letter 100 times by now. The words were wearing thin at the creases where I'd folded and unfolded the paper. But I could still make out the last line. You're the only one I trust with what matters. For so long, I thought my father didn't love me. I thought his silence was proof that I wasn't worth speaking up for. That I was invisible to him the same way I was invisible to everyone else in that house. But I had it backwards. Dad didn't know how to love out loud. He grew up in a family where emotions were weaknesses and actions were everything. So he showed me he cared the only way he knew how, by protecting me with documents when he couldn't protect me with words. I used to think strength meant fighting back, screaming, demanding to be seen. But now I understand it differently. Sometimes strength is patience. Sometimes it's building a fortress so quietly that no one notices until it's already standing. I'm not going to pretend everything is fixed. Mom and I are still learning how to be in the same room. Marcus has 84 days left in rehab, and I don't know who he'll be when he comes out. Some of my relatives still think I manipulated a dying man. But I know the truth, and that's enough. Dad never said I love you, but he wrote my name on every document that mattered. He gave me the house I grew up in, the security my mother tried to take, and a future no one could steal. That was his way of saying it, and I finally heard him. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like no matter what you accomplished, you were always less than enough, I want you to know something. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. And protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. If this story meant something to you, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And if you have a story of your own, about family, about boundaries, about finally standing up for yourself, share it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Check the description for more stories like this one. Until next time, be kind to yourself. You've earned it.